Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Norma Steller of German Bionic, and you're listening to the New Warehouse podcast. Today's safety tip is always use the ergonomic equipment that is provided. Individual ergonomic safety is key to performance and key to a healthy and happy life off and on the job.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer.
Starting March 28th, Modex 2022 lets you see what's coming and take advantage of it to power your supply chain with more possibilities for years to come. With 850 exhibitors and education sessions, Modex 2022 is where you'll find the more of everything. From illuminating education to next generation technology and equipment in action to the latest equipment and system solutions for your supply chain needs. Visit modexshow.com and join us March 28th to 31st, 2022.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast and bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Norma Steller, and she is the head of IoT at German Bionic. And German Bionic is focused on bringing better ergonomics to the working world and making sure people are safer in that regard. And they're doing that by bringing exoskeleton suits available to the market. So Norma's going to tell us a little bit more about that, and she's going to talk to us about, some of the issues that these types of solutions are providing for the industry and how they can really help. So Norma, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, happy to connect with you all the way over in Germany, across the world here. So it's good that we can do that.
Absolutely.
So why don't you give us a little bit of kind of a brief overview of German Bionic and what really is your mission at German Bionic? What are you guys trying to address?
Yeah, very happy to. German Bionic is a company obviously based in Germany, and we have offices not only here, but also in Japan, the US, and all across Europe.
Okay.
And we basically are the first developers and also manufacturers of smart and powered exoskeletons that are especially designed for the logistics and for warehouse use cases. We're doing that for a while now. We are focusing very much on our technology. We just launched the next generation of our exoskeleton that goes by the name Cray X. Our mission is to provide an ergonomic tool that helps workers in their daily tasks by preventing injuries and accidents that are based on unergonomic workplaces. We try to compensate that with our exoskeleton, which is kind of a little robot that you have on your back. And basically what it does, it just compensates the load that usually lands on your lower back when you do lifting tasks.
Okay, very interesting, and very interesting that you mentioned it's a smart device as well, which I think hence your title, head of Internet of Things, right? Head of IoT. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll get a little into the product a little later, but why don't we talk first? Let's kind of, I guess, address the issue, right? So it really addressing kind of these musculoskeletal disorders that really impact workers. Obviously, we're working in an environment where there's a lot of lifting that's going on. There are heavy items, things need to be moved. I mean, we're doing material handling, so it's in the name, right? Handling, right? Material. So
absolutely,
all different sizes, all different kinds of things. So why is kind of addressing these musculoskeletal disorders so important, and just how large is the impact on workers on a global scale?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think that in our modern world, the handling of goods becomes more and more important, or is more and more important, since we are fostering our very comfortable lifestyles where we can deliver basically everything to our doorstep. Yeah. And as you mentioned, it's handled by people, and we should never forget that it's not a robot army somewhere. It's basically, it goes through a lot of hands until we have it in our own hand. Yeah. And thus the whole topic gets more and more important. And also what we especially observe here is that due to the corona pandemic, there's a new awareness for those people, because we had a lot of shortages in the last couple of weeks and months. And I think that shines a light on those jobs like never before. And that's something very positive, because since we are doing this kind of handling of goods with our own hands, everyone can imagine that this is a very, let's say, physical demanding task. No matter how many, or there's a bunch of people that try to make it easier for the workers, a lot of experts looking into those issues, but still in the end, people are lifting and twisting to move the goods around. And we all know that especially we have very sensible body parts, and one of them is the lower back, for example, that gets very much impacted by unergonomic lifting. And this happens, even though we try to prevent it, it still happens, because especially when times are tough and people really have to push for making our next day delivery possible, the repetitiveness of the tasks plus the weight of the individual items eventually can lead to pain and exhaustion, and in worst case scenarios to injuries, and some people or some workers might even have to leave their job. So we try to, or we see that in the people's minds more and more, which is positive, but we also should find an answer to that. And for us, the answer is not, hey, let's wait for the ultimate robot that kicks those people out of their jobs. Yeah. That's not really what we're thinking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think in general, the ergonomics is something that is in the whole safety concept very much upfront, but also a topic that is super tough to handle due to all the flexibility needed to provide the customers the services they request. So looking into that, keeping workers safe in ergonomic terms, keeps them obviously healthy, and those people are very, very much needed, since in the end we will see that those magic robots are not around. So we need those people, we need to keep them in their jobs, and we need to prevent injuries that can be caused by, as I said, those workplace conditions. But sometimes also physical exhaustion leads to more injuries and accidents. Mm-hmm. That we should never forget that also accidents happens because people get tired on their jobs. So those two things are really in our focus: preventing injuries and preventing accidents.
Very interesting. And, I think you touched on a lot of great things there. I mean, especially, talking about, it's just the idea of having robots kind of take over. You mentioned a couple of times in there we're very far off, I think, from there. So addressing the actual issue that's happening now in a different way, I think is a really smart idea. And I know from my experience working in warehouses and things of that nature, I mean, the sprains and the strains on the back and different muscles because of, improper lifting techniques, it's very hard to prevent, especially if people are, already kind of stuck in the habit of lifting in certain ways or in the improper way. So it's very difficult thing to address without some kind of support or device or something that can really kind of help them. So I think what you guys are doing is a great thing. And obviously, you touched on the labor shortages in there as well, which I think is a big thing, because as we see these labor shortages and, people are getting, I guess, more creative where they can get employees from. So you may see people coming into warehouse logistics environment that maybe have never worked in something like that. So they're not typically used to, that type of lifting or that type of repetitive movement. And, that's where you kind of see, where, you can train and tell people, so many times to lift in a certain way, but ultimately, the person has to take that in and do it. And if somebody has not had that kind of experience and understood that, I mean, it's certainly an opportunity or a risk where, they're doing the wrong type of movement. And in that sense, you open yourself up as a company as well for that risk and, potentially, losing another worker. Obviously, we don't want people to get hurt as well, but then, it also hurts the business in a sense too. So you guys have come up with this solution, and you mentioned earlier about the new product, the Cray X Power Suit. So tell us a little bit about that, and I'm curious to hear, how it's kind of, I see one behind you there, I think. Is that one behind you right there? Very cool looking. So tell us a little bit about the Cray X Power Suit and really kind of how it works and how it helps address these issues.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. So basically the Cray X has a very simple principle as a foundation, and that is that we want to keep the worker as the person and the human in the workplace, because they are still the ones that can solve problems very easily. They have the intelligence, they have all the emotional solution findings that we need in those workplaces. But as I said, we are aware that we might not have the physical capacities to really keep up with demand. And that's why we say, hey, let's combine human intelligence with robots and think both as one system together. So we have the worker, and the worker puts on, for example, our Cray X, and then both of them are one unit, one with the intelligence, the other part with the power. You put it on like you would put on a simple backpack. It takes a little bit of training, but in the end you can put it on I think our champs in the office can do it in 20 seconds. I would say the normal worker probably needs 40 seconds. And then basically the exoskeleton augments your body. It kind of supports your movement by adding energy. And the important thing is, or maybe a little bit of background here, exoskeletons come in a large variety, right. And those exoskeletons have many, many different use cases. And ours, being a powered exoskeleton, is a very, let's say, strong exoskeleton. It can support people with up to 30 kilogram or 66 pounds. I hope I converted that correctly. So that means we are able to really compensate that load. Or in other words, when you are lifting something that weighs 80 pounds, 66 of those are not lifted by you, it's lifted by the robot. So we can decrease the amount significantly that people have to really pick up. And this is done basically by the engines we have engines in the exoskeleton that do the job in the end. All works by amplifying the movement. So that means we need to look into understanding movement patterns very well, that we can support those. And this is basically our strong point, because we, in the very early phases of the project, we realized, okay, we have to use data for that, and we have to really look deep into that aspect, because in the end, every one of us moves super differently, because every one of us comes with a different physical set to the job. Yeah. And I'm talking here also about very obvious things, females and males on the workplace, older people, younger people. We want to include them in the job and also make it easier for them to keep up with physical stronger people. So the exoskeleton needs to react to those things. It needs to react to the fact that I'm a female, that I'm not very strong myself. So it has to support me in a different way than, for example, my male colleagues who are, footballers in their free time and super strong by physical conditions. Right. And that's why our sensors can detect that. We learn also the movements with our machine learning. That's why I have the title head of IoT, because we do take the data, processes in our cloud, understand the movement, and then give the user feedback back, and the exoskeleton reacts. And basically, this is kind of the system. So you do a movement, the exoskeleton supports you, you do the next movement. You don't really feel it after a while. You only feel it when put the exoskeleton in neutral mode and it doesn't support you anymore. That's what you feel, because you get used to it super quickly. So basically, that's a very simple principle. What it also sets us apart is that we try to find a different approach to this kind of products, because putting a robot on your back can be super intimidating. I mean, it's like a machine, and then your supervisor comes and says, hey, would you like to put it on your back? Obviously, there's some things you have to consider when it comes to usability and also the feeling of being safe in the system. So we also take a lot of effort to build interfaces that people feel comfortable with. So basically you can compare to a little smartphone display on the exoskeleton that gives you all kinds of information about the exoskeleton itself, but also about your performance. With the exoskeleton, it tells you precisely what it does in terms of compensation, because we also want to give the user a little bit of feedback, how much the exoskeleton does help the person. As it is a preventative tool, we need to make sure that people use it, and thus we need to make sure that they understand it, what it does. So we spend a lot of effort there to explain those things. Basically, very simply said, the exoskeleton just tells you at the end of the session how many elephants the exoskeleton lifted, and not weren't lifted by you. We convert all those numbers and give you this very easy to understand data. So that's really the foundation of everything, like a strong machine powered by AI with a very user-friendly interface that can be used by everyone. And as I said, we are really focusing on compensating the load on the lower back, since that's one of the major weak points of our body. But we also look into now how we can how we can use the energy even more. And that's why the new generation will also have a walking support. So it will support every step you take. Something that you think of as a demand or anything, but it's just from there we look more into the energy that we can provide, because every energy the robot can provide, the person doesn't have to provide. So with, for example, the walking support, we try to minimize the fatigue that can come up in the workplace by giving them as much support as we can, lifting, walking, that the worker saves as much energy, because there, as I said, we try to prevent fatigue, and thus we want to try to prevent people getting injured or having accidents. The root causes in fatigueness. So that's basically our system.
Wow.
I hope I explained it.
Very well. Not so basic, very, very intricate and complex system, but obviously, helping end user address their issue in a simple way for them, right? Just throw something on and all of a sudden you're lifting elephants, like you said, right? So really, really interesting. I mean, it's very cool, and I love that able to just put this something not necessarily huge or anything on your back, and it's able to kind of augment you in a way that you can really save yourself from any type of injury, and also become essentially more productive in a way as well, because it lightens the load, so you're feeling like you can do more work, essentially move more material. So it's very interesting, and you're the head of IoT, like you mentioned, and so you're utilizing machine learning, and the device itself is considered connected and smart, right? So we talked a little bit about kind of being able to take that data point and generate that back and give feedback to the employees and the company. So tell us a little bit more about that. Like how is it connected in a sense, and how is that data really being driven? Like what you mentioned, kind of like calculating, I guess how many elephants have been lifted for the day or something, but how else can, maybe like the warehouse managers take some of those data points and make some decisions based on that? What kind of things are being generated?
Yeah. Maybe before I get to that, I would just, because you said something super important that is also important to me, that you said the performance is also relevant. And here it's also like, or what I want to shine a light on, that it's a win-win situation. When you provide ergonomic workplaces, the performance will be great, right? And that's something, for example, that we want to, or that we can basically prove with our data. That relationship that you don't have to decide, oh, should I make my workplace ergonomic or should I make it more performant? No, it's basically the both.
Right.
You know, when you do one thing, when you improve the ergonomics, you will improve the performance. Yeah. And so for the data point, as you said, we do the calculations to communicate certain data points back to the worker to get the worker on board with the system. That's one basic thing. The other thing is that we use the data to calculate individual movement patterns that has an impact of the control system of the exoskeleton. So basically, we are working on that every single user gets basically their own control system, a very individual behavior of the exoskeleton. And thirdly is what we call an on-site insight into the workplaces by providing curated data to the warehouse manager, for example. And the warehouse manager has the opportunity to work with our dashboard that we provide and basically can see the individual workplaces and, let's say, basic performance KPIs, especially all relevant to ergonomics. For example, how is the lift walking ratio? How many lifts are done in a certain time frame? Because especially repetitiveness is super important to have an eye on, but also compare different workplaces with each other, because in the end, every workplace is usually strictly designed, and it's sometimes super tough to spot why, for example, in one area, the workplace performs super well, but the same workplace in another area doesn't. And just putting each data point or both workplaces next to each other and looking at the basic KPIs, it can hint you certain ways. For example, we have cases where our customers identify that at one workplace, their workers tend to walk way more than on others. And then they can dive deep and find out why it is. You know, maybe the forklift parking is not as intended, and maybe things are too far away, and then they can come back and redesign the workplaces to make it easier for them. And I know that a lot of companies do that, obviously. Our strength is that we are delivering real-time data all the time. So we don't have to come do measurements manually or whatever. You know, you have the data basically all the time. It runs in the background, and it's basically a value on top to the exoskeleton. So you get the ergonomic support for your workers, but you also get this data on top with our system. So that's basically the most important use cases. And then maybe also as a fourth point here, which is not really important maybe to the customer, but more important, I think, to the overall industry. We also, of course, look into the data and get an understanding on the workplaces itself, because I think that's something where we can educate a lot of people and what's really going on in terms of how many load are people, or how high is the load that the exoskeleton is really moving, which gives us an idea how much is the load overall on people, how much do they really walk, and how, because the numbers are quite intimidating. You know, we have people that are where the exoskeleton, frankly, lifts around 6 tons a day, 7 tons a day. Wow. You know, plus the one that we don't catch because the things might be more heavy than 66 pounds, and they tend to walk, you know, several kilometers. I don't have the miles, but it's like I think our champion walked 17 kilometers in a shift, which is super crazy when you think about that. And they do it every single day. And that's something that we can also, you know, advocate a little bit, not only to customers because they know it, but more also every one of us, that we make sure that we understand that, you know, this nice package in front of my door comes from somewhere, and this is what it means. You know, I'm not saying it's something bad. By all means, it's not. It's super nice. I'm very glad for this lifestyle that we have. But I think we just always need to keep in mind that we also have an, let's say, responsibility to make sure that we understand all the consequences that come with it. And that's something we have data on.
Yeah, very great stuff. I mean, I love what you said there about there may be these things like, you know, how many steps are workers taking a day, and all these different things that, you know, we may be addressing in different ways. And you mentioned, you know, kind of manually measuring in a sense, but a lot of times, you know, when we look at those types of things, and, you know, certain, you know, companies may not have the the resources to spend all that time collecting that data manually. So being able to put something in place like this, that's just automatically real time generating this data, it's very easy to see where an issue might be or where you're creating too much, walking time. Like your example, the forklift parking may be, far away from, where they clock in. So, why are they spending so much time getting to the forklift or getting started from the time that they clock in? Well, because, the forklifts are so far away. Yeah. I mean, it may be something that seems obvious, but when the data is there, like calling it out to you, then, it really kind of brings that to the forefront and then puts it in front of your face and says like, oh, wow, this is actually really a big kind of waste in the lean sense there. So it's really interesting how the data is being utilized and the data points that are being generated. I think it's things that, oftentimes are maybe right in front of us, but it's not necessarily right in front of us, like screaming at us saying like, hey, look at this data, like it's telling you that there's an issue.
I also like another aspect there also that's important to me, since in our world we generate a lot of data right now. I mean, every single thing screams at us with data. Mm-hmm. And it's also something we try to keep it really simple also with the dashboard, because it's it doesn't really make sense to put all the lifting angles and whatever on the screen and the raw data of our sensors, etc., because no one really can work with that. It's too much. So we really try to condense that on basic KPIs like steps taken, how many lifts a minute, and how much weight was compensated, because this gives you already all the important KPIs to really understand how is the utilization of all my workplaces and is it as intended. I think sometimes we also make it harder for us when we are overkilling with data. So we try to keep it simple, keep it understandable also for every customer. Not all of our customers can afford a super fleshed out business intelligence department in their organizations. So we try to make it accessible. What the whole topic, it's to start the technology that it's not too complicated right from the get-go, and make sure that everyone feels comfortable with it. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because as you mentioned, there's tons of data flowing and tons of numbers, and some people, when they just see just like these numbers just like dumped in front of them on top of them, they panic. They don't know what to do with the numbers, right? So making it simplified, like as you mentioned, through the dashboard, I mean, it is a huge important thing for people to be able to worry about just acting and making proper business decisions instead of having to worry about interpreting the data the right way. And can they do a pivot table or whatever they need to do to figure out what is this data actually telling them. So being able to provide that is a great thing as well. So we talked about really the smart aspect of the suit and kind of what it does. But I'm curious to know, and you mentioned earlier in the episode, I mean, there's a lot of different kind of exoskeletons out there and in different applications in a sense, and it is something that you do have to wear, right, as an employee. So I'm curious on the comfort level. How does it feel wearing the suit, and people that have been using it in the field now? I mean, what's some of the feedback on that? Because I have certainly heard, I guess, in some instances, like some of the exoskeletons that are out there are maybe not like the most comfortable to wear, or maybe they feel like a little bulky, so it's hard to get used to. So what is the feedback from kind of the field on that?
Yeah, the comfort level is something that is absolutely key to deliver the technology. That's absolutely the major thing, and that's also the major part where we iterate on. That's why we are having right now the 5th gen. So basically, what we see or what we saw in the past, you have to find a sweet spot between how much does the system weight itself and how much energy does the system provide. And in the end, every exoskeleton should make sure that you get more energy out than you have to put in. That's basically the number one. And that's something that people can feel. You have to prove it as a manufacturer, but it's also, that's an aspect that people feel it when it puts on. Because when you are getting tired of using it and when you don't feel the support at all, then you won't accept it. And that's something we worked on. So we got lighter and lighter and lighter for every generation. And now we also got stronger and stronger and stronger. So the energy output is something that you really feel, and it really gives you support. Hence the overall, what does it do for me? Question is answered. People feel it right away. The next thing is that you have to really spend a lot of time on the man-machine interface. That's how we call it. It's a little bit technical, but basically it says how many belts you have, how many straps you have, how many clasps you have, etc. Yeah. And you want to keep it simple, but you also want to make sure that you can fit in as much body types as possible. And you should also and always consider inclusiveness here. That means figuring different body types in different regions, but also between male and females, etc. This is super important. So you have to provide people with an individual set of, let's say, soft parts. And that's what we also do. So you have your hard part, and then you have your individual soft parts that are in your size, what you feel comfortable with. It's basically like trying to find a jacket. You can say it's size M or L or whatever. Right. In the end, you pick what's good for you. And when it feels comfortable, the exoskeleton works. So that's super important. And what's also important is that you get used to it. What we sometimes observe is that, again, because we have this mindset of the robot will solve every problem that we ever have, an exoskeleton is an assistant, and you have to train with it. It's something you have to work a little bit with before you really get the most out of. It's a machine, and you have to adapt your mindset to it, because sometimes you need to have time alone with the machine to understand it for yourself. So we are taking a lot of consideration in the onboarding experience, and that's something where we are even helping on site with the customers, figuring that out with experts from us that can help the workers to find their way with the exoskeleton, because sometimes you have to have just the expert next to you that you can ask questions with, etc. So that's something that we do. And lastly, that's our biggest advantage really, is our exoskeleton might not feel comfortable the first time you use it, but it gets more and more comfortable since we learn how you move, and it can adapt to that. So that's another aspect which, when I want to challenge my colleagues in the other exoskeleton department, I always try to answer the question how passive systems should ever feel comfortable when they can't adapt to the user, because that's really what we try to achieve. The system needs to adapt to the user and not the other way around, because everything else will feel uncomfortable and people won't accept it. Yeah. And user acceptance is key to the technology, absolutely. And so the first user feedback when we got our first generations out was so-so, because we were way too complicated with our technology. It's probably a little tendency of our German engineering culture, to put everything in that we can find. So we basically got away back and define our machine now as a B2C product. So we design it for everyone. It's not a machine for industrial use. No, we as developers, we design it basically for everyone, for our friends or family. That's what we have in mind. So the whole interface is much easier now. And what we observe is the more and more easier it gets with usability, less straps you have an interface, as I said, with a display that you can interact with, the more and more comfortable people judge the system, even though you might not have changed something on the mechanics, because it's a very individual assumption, or it's something that is super hard to deconstruct, because there's so many factors when people say it's comfortable or not comfortable, that you can't only boil it down to the mechanics itself. It's also like how the machine presents itself, how it's onboarded. And we learned that we have to make sure it's easy, it provides you with noticeable energy, and that we have an onboarding experience that helps to overcome the first hurdle of, oh my God, it's a robot and I have to put it on my back. Then it's great. But with every technology, the first feedbacks were very helpful, because would we have not done a lot of testing in the beginning, we probably would have not had a market entry with our products, because they were way too complicated. That was a major issue. Yeah.
Very interesting, and I love that you kind of listened to the feedback and adjusted to that as well. And it's interesting that
absolutely,
yeah, you mentioned
absolutely,
the first generation kind of loading everything in and then stripping it back a little bit. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's because, as I said, it's what we observe in when we go out to our customers is really that, as I said, they have so much. They invest so much in ergonomic workplaces. They absolutely do. They try, and they are considerate about their workers. But a lot of tools they have right now are not let's say, they can't be really well integrated into the workplace, and workers tell us that they are too slow or it's too cumbersome to get it. And it's all very important data points to make sure that you provide an ergonomic tool that people are happy to use. And an exoskeleton, you have it always with you. You wear it, so it's not something where you have to go and get the crane and put it on. No, it's there with you. And then you have to make sure that it helps you when you need it, when it's really your movement that should be supported, that movement should be supported. And that's basically the key. We don't want to build another vacuum lifter that has 10 centimeters of dust on it, as we sometimes see. Yeah. So the worker feedback is the essential part here, because they are the ones that needs to understand prevention, that needs to understand what it does for them, and that are really happy to have it. So we're doing constant testing with our product and make sure that we understand this group very well.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. I mean, it's really interesting, and it sounds like you're really listening to not only what the business needs are, but also the employees themselves and the feedback they're giving, which I think is so important. And you touched on it when you were talking earlier about the importance of the user acceptance to something like this technology, because I think that you look at something like this and what it's helping them do. I mean, it's helping them do their job better in a safer way. But at the same time, if the technology is not something that they can feel comfortable with in a relatively quick adoption phase, I mean, you end up with obviously the people where it's like, well, I was doing my job just fine without this before, so I'm not going to use it. And like you said, you end up with 10 centimeters of dust, right? So it's really, really important to have that aspect, and it's great that you guys are recognizing that and focusing on that. So really interesting stuff, and I'm really interested to listen to you this morning, Norma. Well, this morning for me, I think it's afternoon over there in Germany, just about, right? So, I love what you guys are doing, and the exoskeleton thing is certainly something that's kind of been on my radar the last couple of months, because I'm seeing a lot of different iterations kind of pop up, and I love this one because the smart and the connected aspect of it, and just being able to be comfortable as well. So if people are interested in learning more about German Bionic and the Cray X Power Suit, how can they do that?
I think the simplest way is always visit our website, germanbionic.com. There you will find pictures. I think pictures are the most important thing here, because a lot of people have no idea what exoskeletons are, which is, it's fine. I think 6 years ago, we had no idea what computers were. So we have pictures, videos, also feedback from real users, from real workers that's there. And it's not something we make up in our PR system. And there's also a couple of links, I think, to some media coverage that was not done by us. It was basically done by news media, especially in Germany, because they observe us as well, where they interview people, for example, at airports or warehouses, etc. And so you can watch that, because I think having live pictures, how it works, how it sounds, because it has amazing sound, will give people a very good idea. And then you can just reach out to us. All necessary contacts are there. We have obviously social media like everyone else. That's the usual way to get to us, or visit our factory in Augsburg, Germany. Also an open factory where everyone can come in, and if everyone around, then pop by.
Okay, great. And we'll put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So really great stuff and improvements in safety and ergonomics of workers. So thanks so much for what you guys are doing, and thank you for your time on the show today, Norma.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.